Hello, everybody. Gabriel, nice to see you. All right. And Mary, nice to see you guys, both of you. I'm trying because what I did, let me give you guys an update. I hardwired my computer to my router. So we should be having faster speeds, which I'm hoping going back to this software. I won't get so much of that static. Hello, Javier. Nice to see you guys. So anyway, I hope this is better. I was suspecting that the reason it was jolting like that was my connection. So, do we have any questions to start with? I'm looking here and let's see. Nice to see you guys. So, I had a disaster today. Well, I guess it's not a disaster. Oh, here we go. Here's a question from Gabriel. Um, Yesterday I practiced some duets with a friend. He has a nice garden and we played outdoors. Yay, very nice. I like playing outside. It was my first time playing outdoors and it was a disaster. Wow. Okay. I guess if you're just not used to it, what happened with you? Javier asks, what skills do you not recommend practicing at all? Well, I do have that one video about what skills not to practice if you're a jazz player. So I don't do any of the modes. And let's be very clear about the reason why I don't do the modes, okay? The reason I don't do the modes is because the um, tonalization studies cover all the modes equally, right? So I do not, there's so much for us to practice anyway, so I'm not going to do the same exercise twice and just put a different name on it, right? The only difference between that and doing, let's say, for example, the Dorian, the only difference is that you're going to start and end on a different note. And to me, that just seems like such a huge waste of time, especially because we're talking about modes for um, all the different. So we have natural minor, we have the Phrygian, we have the Lydian, Mixolydian, right? Makes no sense to me. I also don't believe in practicing scales that, and and this is in the video too. There's some scales that I believe that the academics made up. And my impression of how this works, right? The academics look at what the greats did. They boil what the greats did down into a tiny package, like into the individual, um, you know, components. And they say, that's a skill. When indeed it's not a skill at all, it's more language, right? And when you take something that should have been on the language area and try to force it as a skill, what you now have done is taken something beautiful and made it sterile. So a skill like that that I don't practice is the bebop skill. I don't think there's any benefit whatsoever to practicing the bebop skill as a skill. And also no benefit to doing it like as tonalization studies. I don't think there's any benefit for that whatsoever. Um, and in that same category is the blues scale. I don't practice the blues scale. I've never practiced the blues scale. I think when you're going to do the blues, it should not ever register in your head as a scale. Now, does that mean what I play never comes out as a scale? Absolutely not. There's times when I play, for example, that some academic could look at that and say, "Oh, he just played the bebop scale." Well, no, that's not the bebop scale. That's jazz language that the academics can't wrap their head around and try to cram into their skill world, right? That's jazz language. And same thing with the blues, right? So when I'm doing the blues stuff, I'm thinking language. I'm thinking of playing stuff that sounds bluesy. And I'm doing all this in C so that it is easy to register. Our C, B flat concert, right? If you're going to tell me that's a skill, even though every note I played was quote unquote in the blues scale, that doesn't mean that what I'm thinking is, hey, let's play this scale right here, right? Now, I just forgot what I was going to say. Anyway, so yes, I don't do any scales that cause redundancy in my practice time. I'm a very thorough practicer. I don't want to double up on the work, and so yes, I don't practice blues scale. I don't practice the bebop scale. As far as scales that anything else, I don't know. I would have to know what the scales are. Those are the only ones on my list. Gabriel says I could play like 10 minutes, but I couldn't hear the sound. So I pushed a lot, and oh yes, I know what you're talking about. I pushed a lot, and I had to stop because my chops died. As I would like to do it again, any tip to play outside? Um, if the issue is that you can't hear yourself, you can put one earplug in the ear opposite of your friend. So like if the two of you are sitting next to each other, let's say he's on your right side, put the earplug on your left side so that you can hear what's going on inside your head. But this really should not be a problem. It should not be a problem for you to hear yourself outside. And I have to ask if it's really that you can't hear yourself or that you're not comfortable with what you're hearing, right? Because it's going to sound different. Okay? You're not going to hear the reverberation. You're not going to hear the resonance of the room, right? Um, so yes, I can tell you this. The problem that you described, not being able to hear yourself, let me make sure that's what you're saying. Couldn't hear the sound. So I'm not sure if that means the same thing as not hearing yourself. Um, but this is an issue that I face often, and usually the earplugs, because I play a lot of gigs where they crank the PA system so loud that all you can hear is sometimes, oh yes, you couldn't hear yourself. Okay, so um, yeah, I often play gigs that are so loud I can't hear myself. And what I do in that situation is put the earplugs in, because then I can hear what's happening inside of me, and I can hear all that too. The only problem with that is that the pitch is going to be different. What you hear pitch wise in your head is different from what comes out of the horn. That's why when you're going to be playing outside, I would recommend putting one uh, earplug in, not both. But here's another obvious suggestion, really, is maybe you should practice outside a little bit. If you can find somewhere to go, get used to what your trumpet sounds like outside. When you do practice, are you practicing in a very small room? And another question for you is, are you always practicing in the same room? So if you're always practicing in the same room, what might help you with this a lot is practicing in a different room each time. When you have that opportunity, find different rooms to practice in, so that you get used to the sound being different. You know that there's a book that I read. There's a book that I read that talks about obstacles in our performance. It's a book called Choke, Choke. Very wonderful book. For me personally, it validated a lot of stuff that I had already started teaching years ago, but there wasn't scientific evidence to back up what I was teaching yet. At least I didn't know about that evidence. And so, for example, this thing that she talks about, there's when you have an obstacle in your performance, she says that being prepared for 3 obstacles makes your mind ready for most obstacles. It's when we go into the performance thinking that nothing could go wrong, right? And I think the problem with not being used to hearing yourself sound like that, I think that is one of those obstacles things. So if you can go to a different room and play in that room, play in the bathroom, play in a big, if you can find a big grand hall, what do you call it, a ballroom, find a ballroom and practice in a ballroom if you have access. Practice in a gymnasium, practice in a cafeteria, find different places to explore that sound, and that will help you when you find yourself in different places. It won't just help you with playing outside, it'll help you with playing everywhere. Javier says, a question I've always had is if what they play in jazz has been thought or has any rationale or justification. And you can analyze it musically, but that doesn't mean the guys playing it did. That's absolutely true. Now, here's the thing. I don't think what we play in that moment is stuff that has rationale or justification. What we play in that moment, especially if it is now, I do believe that there's different types of players on a spectrum of how I don't know how much improv they're doing and how much of a death grip they have. I think the greats don't have that death grip. I think the greats, especially when you get up to the faster tempos. Right now, I'm transcribing Sonny Stitt's uh, solo on Tune Up right now, and it's flying. It's the tempo is way over, not way over. It's over 300 beats per minute, and a lot of what he's playing just sounds like a blur. And for the first time in decades, I have to slow the recording down so I can hear what he's doing. I have not had to do that in a long, long, long time. And mainly because I've been transcribing mostly trumpet players, and I think it's maybe easier for me to hear trumpet players. Um, but with this solo, I gave up. It's, there's this one part that went, and I'm like, what is that? I can't hear it. And so I put it to 50% of the speed, and and then I could finally hear the notes he was playing. Um, but you can't tell me that at that kind of tempo, that they're being deliberate with all that. Do you know what that is? That's chaos coming out of the horn. But it's beautiful chaos, right? It's beautiful. Now, what I'm saying is the control that we have over that kind of improv is the control over the environment we were living in that led to that performance. This is a very important point addressing what you asked. You said, so you're talking about how much of, and the words I would like to use is deliberate. How much of what the improvisers are doing is deliberate and thought out and analyzed, or how much of it is just in the moment expressive stuff just flowing out of the horn? I would like to think that with most of the greats, 99% of what's coming out is just stuff that's flowing out. But so how then do they have this such marvelous, miraculous playing? It's by the control that they put into the environment, their own musical environment, by choosing what they listen to, choosing who they study, choosing what they practice, choosing what gigs that they play. There, I don't actually agree with this, but there's people who do it. There's people who won't take the gig because they think it'll influence them badly. They will only take gigs, and that's part of what I'm talking about. They will only take gigs that influence them well, right? To make them better players. I think that's a luxury most musicians don't have. Most musicians have to take whatever gigs come up so they can pay the bills, right? So yes, I don't think most of what happens, and the only reason I'm saying that is because I'm one of those control freak players. It took me so long to truly improvise because I was one of those that had the stranglehold on my creativity. I felt like I had to make everything come out of the horn, and I struggled with this concept of letting go and just letting whatever comes out comes out. I struggled with that for a long, long time. Um, But if you practice the way I practice, you don't have to struggle with that. That's the irony of it. If you practice well, stuff spills out of your playing in an almost random nature, but then when you dig into it, like when the academics look at it afterwards, they say, "Oh, look, he did this here and he did that there." And you can do that without even knowing that's what you were doing. Hello, Anthony. He says, "I hope you are well." Yes, I am, thank you. "I just stopped to say hello. I have to practice now because I missed yesterday and the trumpet gods were angry." Oh man. Again with the trumpet gods, right? Yeah. So what's up, guys? What else? What other questions? These are good questions. If I did not have a good answer, and this is a general rule for later, if I didn't have a good answer and it's still not clear, please feel free. I'm not one of those guys that thinks I know everything. That may not be able to believe that, but I don't feel like I know everything, and I'm not an expert at mouthing stuff, right? Voicing stuff. The stuff that I can share is the stuff that's in here, and it's not always easy to get it from here out to you guys. Javier says, "Fear of making mistakes makes you overthink what is coming out of the horn." So yes, you know what? One of the first thing, one of the first topics I ever wrote on. I'll give you I'll give you some background here. In the '90s, before the internet, I used to read music business books. I still do. I still do. Um, but they all told you back even in the '80s that you should have a newsletter. And I tried sending out a newsletter. When you have, when you're way, way beneath the poverty line, and back then, I was, me and my ex-wife's income combined was a fraction, less than half, a fraction of the poverty line. So I think the poverty line back then was, I think, $18,000 a year. We were way beneath half of that. And so you're not in those in that if you've got that kind of income, you're not going to have a newsletter that you have to put stamps on the newsletter. What good is that? So when the internet came out and we could have email newsletters, man, I jumped on that. I had a newsletter that I put out every week, and the format was, uh, I would put my news at the top, and then I would put upcoming dates, like if I had a public performance, that would be next, and then at the bottom I'd put a little article about trumpet stuff. One of the very first articles I wrote was this article about how you can't think critically and creatively at the same time. And this is something I read in a book a long, long, long time ago. I don't know what book it was, but this is not me making this up. You cannot be critical and creative. And in fact, you know what? When you're a kid in elementary school and they're teaching you about brainstorming, someone told me they don't teach brainstorming anymore. I think that's a very sad thing. But when when you're doing brainstorming, they tell you something that is consistent with what we're talking about here, they say no matter what pops in your head while you're brainstorming, write it down. Don't try to figure out whether it works or not. That's the whole point of brainstorming, is to turn the critique off and just let ideas flow. And then this idea of being creative works exactly the same way. You cannot be at the same time creative and critical. So if you're improvising and you're listening to what comes out and saying that's not nice, that's horrible, that's out of tune, or whatever criticism you have, that's going to get in the way of your improv. Because improv is 100% creative. All music performance is creative, but improv takes that to a whole different level, because even the notes that you play are creative. Okay, so yes, you're right. You cannot be both. You cannot be creative and critical at the same time. Anthony says, small g for trumpet gods. Yes, that's correct too. We do not give them any honor because they don't exist. That's right. Gabrielle says, Eddie, a friend of mine who plays clarinet told me she uses drones. What are these things, please? A drone is a electronically created frequency that you play. Now let me clarify this. The word drone comes from something else, okay? So before people started practicing with drones, there were drones in musical composition. A musical composition drone would be something, usually a long note, that stayed throughout the composition. We would call that a drone. It could be, instead of a long note, a rhythmic figure or a melodic figure. But if the melodic figure is too long, it kind of loses its validity as a drone. But so yeah, you could have like in a composition, if that keeps going, that throughout the whole composition, that would be considered a drone. Now in the more modern era of internet everything, when the people are talking about using drones, they're talking about having one note being generated on their computer or nowadays on their phone. One note. And what they do with this is they use it for tuning. I have not done much of this. I'm not sure yet if I even like it yet. And the reason I feel that way is because how am I thinking this? That drone is not human, but then neither is a metronome, right? So I don't know. My mind hasn't worked through that yet. But that's what a drone is. We use the drone to work on the intonation. For that matter, I don't even use the tuner much. I use the tuner to get my horn in pitch. I use it once a day at the beginning of the day to get tuned up. But I actually believe that intonation is a human expressive component of the music. It's not as scientific as the academics like to make it out to be. So, yeah, that's what a drone is. And to use it, different people use the drones different way. You could put it on do for the key that you're playing in and tune everything to do. I've heard other people put the the drone on So. So and tuning everything to So. Um, like I said, I've not done a lot with that. I've played with it a little bit. It annoyed me, but maybe it annoyed me the way that a metronome used to annoy me when I was a kid. So no, I don't really have a lot of advice for that, but you didn't ask for advice. You asked me what it was, and that's what it is. Papa, Mr. Walker, nice. Thank you for joining us. Um, oh, doing another taps. That's so. Mr. Walker is one of those trumpet players. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think he told me a while back ago that he's with that organization that organizes taps for the soldiers. And so he's out on location right now, I guess. Javier says the best Chilean jazz trumpet player passed away a few weeks ago from COVID. Oh man. We just had someone in Houston pass away like that, a trumpet player. And I saw an interview of him when he tried to play a classical piece and it sounded awful. Okay, so yes, that's a thing, right? Being good at one style does not mean you're automatically good at another style. We have this in Houston. I guess I should be careful about that. Sometimes I shoot my mouth off about stuff, but this is a thing though, right? There are people who want to play jazz who are classically trained players. They get offended if I don't refer them. Now, that what I'm talking about hasn't happened recently. I'm talking about over the last 30 years. I've been in Houston 30 years now. They don't like it when I don't refer them to a jazz gig. But the problem is these guys don't even listen to jazz. They don't even know what it's supposed to sound like. You know, that reminds me of, we had Terrence Tony as a guest soloist one time when I was in a jazz band. And Terrence Tony says, at the time he was doing a lot of solo performances with orchestras. And he said you could tell the classical players when they were playing jazz. Because, you know, a jazz dude, when he's playing, they rock like this, man. When they're really getting into it, right? They rock back and forth like that. He says that the classical guys, when they're really getting into the jazz stuff, they rock like this. So, and that's what I mean, you know, music is cultural. If you're not making any attempt to be part of that culture, you shouldn't be playing that music. And it starts with the listening. Music is cultural if you're not making any attempt. Oh, sorry. If you're not making any attempt, like for example, same way what we're talking about jazz players, I've had jazz players for the I shouldn't have singled out just the classical guys. I've actually had jazz players too get angry with me. Sometimes I do book classical like brass quintets or brass quartets or whatever, and they get angry with me because I haven't referred them to a classical gig. But if you don't listen to classical music, you don't practice classical music, you don't you don't have any interest in classical music except to take the money, um, you shouldn't be doing that stuff, right? Oh, there's more to this story. Javier says, and after that he said, and if I can't play it right, I don't give a. Ha! He was someone raised on the the suburbs of Valparaiso. And when he was a kid, he was in gangs and stuff, beating people up. He didn't care much about anything at all. Oh man, I gotta hear this guy's music. Oh man. Oh, here's Go Play the Trumpet. Love the topic. When I took lessons with Justin Kaiser, he didn't even remember what he played in his solos. That's correct. And he says, not name dropping since he's the less famous one. Yeah, those guys are great. Both of those guys are great. Wonderful players. Gabriel says, thanks, Eddie. Thank you, Gabriel. Um, Cardo says, hello, Eddie. What do you think about the late Roy Hargrove chop-wise? Do you think he had an efficient way of playing, or was he forcing things a bit too much? Um, I'll tell you what, man. How can you even? I don't know. Um, the chops are part of the horn. I mean, a part of the music. So I can't imagine any of his shows where him not sounding the way he sounded. I can't think. I guess that's not the best way to answer that question. I'm not really answering it. Um, you know what? I want to dispel the notion here that chops have to be a certain way. Chops don't have to be a certain way, right? I guess I have to be straight out with this. I don't think there was anything wrong with his chops. And in fact, he kind of influenced me, even though he's a little younger than me, right? Um, I saw an interview with him, and he was between gigs, and they were asking him how much he practiced on the road, and he goes, "What kind of I'm paraphrasing here. I don't remember exactly what he said, but basically saying, what kind of question is that? He's on the road. Where's he gonna practice? You know, if he goes from one gig to the next gig to the next gig, he'll practice when he's got time to practice, but most of the time there's no time to do that. The time he's playing on stage is the time that he's playing. And I don't have a problem with that at all. And if it meant that, so, and by the way, Cardo, let's get something clear. A lot of times when we get on stage and sound like we're struggling, it's not our fault. Okay? We are, what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerable to whatever the sound man decides he's going to do. If you've got an ignorant sound man that doesn't know how to do trumpet, doesn't know how to do jazz, if you've got an ignorant sound man, you're going to sound like crap no matter what. And the chances are when someone is it sounds like they have chop problems, 9 times out of 10, it's because they can't hear themselves. Those, you know what? I'm going to tell you this. I quit going. I quit going to the jam sessions here in town, and I know that's terrible. I know it's part of my responsibility as one of the older dudes to go to the jam sessions. That's how the jazz culture works. There's a lot of responsibility on us older guys to go so that the younger cats have that experience. But I quit going because every jam session I go to is rock concert loud. And I'm just not going to do that. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's not jazz. So yes, I don't mean to sound like I'm like defending Roy Hargrove. I mean, that's not that he needs to be defended, but I'm just saying, a lot of this stuff isn't what we think it is when we hear it. Right? a lot of times the sound on stage is so horrendous, and you just gotta, a lot of times I have to wonder. I watch these live videos, right? And you see these guys, they get out there and they're so energetic, and they're almost pissed off, and they're playing, right? And I'm I'm associating what I see there on the video with my experiences. And if that was me on stage, that would be what I would be doing if the sound engineer for the PA system was incapable. And what are you going to do? You can't fight all of them, because they really, what can you do? There's so much that they can screw up. And I think what happened with me, this is what happened. I just gave up. And so if I want to have a successful performance, I got to get out there and do what these guys are doing. Playing hard like that, it tears me up, because I hate playing like that. And what bothers me the most about that is that's what I've got a reputation for, is that I can do that. I can get out there and with a band that's playing way, way, way too loud, I can get out there and make that work. But I hate having to do that, because it makes me angry, right? It makes me angry that all that time and effort that I've invested into playing, being a better player, is wasted because of this PA system. So yeah, an emotional topic for me. But yes, I think most of the time when someone like that sounds like he's got chop problems, that's not really chop problems. Most of the time it's because the sound people didn't know what they were doing. And I'm saying even the most advanced of those don't know how to set up for a trumpet group. It's all rock concert stuff. Horrible. Oh, that's one of the reasons I'm trying to navigate this coming back from COVID, and I want to have a band and stuff like that. One of the reasons I'm not looking forward to that aspect of it is because of the sound. I don't want to, if people tell me, hey, your band's not loud enough, then hire somebody else. But that's not a good strategy, right? That's not good business. And I'm not going to be the leader of a band where we're playing so loud that nobody can hear themselves. Javier says his name is Christian Coutur, Couturfo. Couturufo. He even played on the Blue Note. Oh, that's great. His sound is dirty, but dirty cool. I'm going to have to check that out. Any other questions? I hope I didn't go overboard on that Roy Hargrove thing. So yeah, I'm going to say it one more time, because the exact word that we're looking at here, he was forcing things. You don't have the luxury in those concert hall settings where they have their fingers on the sliders. You don't have the luxury of not forcing things. You either play to the room and push it like that. You either play to the room and make it work, or just don't get heard. So yeah, I wouldn't put that on him. And you know what? The albums that I heard, he never played like that. That's only his live stuff that he does that. So that's proof right there. I've never heard an album of his that sounded like that. And see, we have a little bit more control over that stuff in the studio. It's not the same thing. All right, what else do you guys got? Yeah, I think, and I probably shouldn't be thinking out loud, but what I've been thinking about doing right now is putting a seven-piece band together. Carlos says, I have the same bad experiences regarding sound engineers. Also, drummers can kill your chops. Absolutely. So yeah, I've been thinking about putting a seven-piece band together because the reason seven pieces, I like writing for four horns, two brass and two saxes. So trumpet and trombone and probably alto and tenor. And um, and if I use that instrumentation, I've already got charts that I've written. And I'm thinking about just doing a one-off concert. Get the guys for maybe two rehearsals. Go to the, and I would have to find a venue first. Find a venue. Um, Invite everybody out, and then, and it would be an artistic thing, not a, we wouldn't play. This would not be an effort to get weddings and stuff like that. The weddings pay better. This wouldn't be an effort to do that. This would be just a jazz thing. And then I'm thinking like do a jazz concert like that, then be over with it. Then do a classical concert like that and be over with it. And just keep sponsoring performances like that. Um, that's what I'm thinking of doing now as the next part of my journey as a trumpet player. That's what I'm looking to do. Now, I've done stuff similar to that before. It just was never the full focus of what I was doing. And I think the difference this time is that's going to be it. In the past, those performances were just like sort of fun stuff I was doing on the side. Now I'm shooting more in the direction that I want to start doing more of that stuff in a more serious light. And I've already got in my head some of the guys that I want to call for that. Um, and it'll be awesome. You know, I want to have also another thing is I want to have them maybe contribute tunes. In the past, my groups, I've always done all the writing. I want to start inviting the guys to do more of the writing so that the show is better. Really. So now the reason I want four horns is because there's more you can do with the voicings. So you can have, so if this is the trumpet and trombone and this is the saxes, you can have this, you can have that, you can have this, you can have this and that. There's so many different things that you can do. If you have three horns, you're pretty limited. Compared to, comparatively speaking, three horns are very, very limited. You might as well have two. The way two horns, you've dictated what order things have to be. Three horns, you're just as dictated. In terms of good writing, right? I'm not talking about experimental stuff. I'm talking about good, high quality writing. When you have three, so like two trumpets and, two brass and a woodwind, you're stuck. Two woodwinds and a brass, you're stuck. You don't have the flexibility you have like you would with four. And so yes, especially if one of those brass is a trumpet. I mean, you could put some other instruments. That's what I meant by experimental stuff. You could put other instruments on the top voice, but in a jazz group, that doesn't make any sense at all. So now you can have like more contrapuntal stuff, but that is also experimental when you talk about jazz, right? So yes, I like the four horn instrumentation. Then once you get past four horns, then you start getting into a lot more variety with what you can do as a writer. We haven't talked much about the composition side of this stuff. Um, I think lately I've been much deeper into that than I have in playing my own horn. All right, we got time for maybe a couple more questions. What do you guys want to know? What do you want to talk about? Nice to see some of you guys again, like seeing Mr. Walker again and seeing Go Play Your Trumpet again. Haven't seen you guys in a while. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, I guess we'll call it quits then. I'll give you guys 30 seconds. Of course, with the delay. Now, maybe you guys can tell me, was the video, I'll go back and look anyway, was the video static? Did it freeze every once in a while? Or was it okay? And like I said at the beginning, what I did was hardwire it to my um, router. Okay, good. Then I'm going to start doing it this way. Very exciting. I didn't know before I did the homework on this. I didn't know that the cable was almost 10 times better than the best Wi-Fi. Why are we even using Wi-Fi? I guess because of the convenience and you just don't use the resources enough, maybe. Um, but yes, now I'm hardwired. I'm giving myself one more week, but I'm sure this is what the problem was. And then I'll put it through the ceiling because I had to get a 50-foot cable. I hope that's actually enough to go through the ceiling. But that's the next step up from here. Might have to go get a 75. Yeah. Gabriel says LAN is much better than Wi-Fi. I might even be able to push some of the values up now that I'm doing this. Um, I just used the old settings. I might not need to use the old settings. I might be able to improve the quality even more and not worry about. Now it is telling me that my CPU is hovering around 60%. So I'm not sure if pushing the resources higher will push that too far. We'll see. Anyway, very good. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. Um, we'll do this again. I do have a rehearsal on Sunday, There, one of the band leaders I used to work with, he's retired now, but he's having one last concert. Oh, actually, that's not how they're saying it. Ricky Diaz, he's having a concert, um, I guess in a month. I think in the first week of June or something like that. And the rehearsal is on Sunday, and I'm looking forward to that. Um, It'll be like a reunion because I haven't seen those guys in so long, especially after COVID, right? I'm very much looking forward to that. Cardo says, Eddie, now that you are talking about your upcoming musical projects, I have a question. How do you organize things up and keep things rolling when there is not much money involved in jazz music? Um, I take other gigs. If you actually saw how many genuine jazz gigs I play, you'd probably not call me a jazz player, right? He says your new project sounds very promising, by the way. Well, thank you. We've done that instrumentation before at a couple of jazz festivals, and that's a powerful instrumentation. That's a very powerful instrumentation. I have a I have an arrangement for that group of Freedom Jazz Dance that we do as a second line because the original is almost second line. If you listen to Freedom Jazz Dance, the original recording, the figure that's repeated throughout the piece is almost second line anyway. It's very close to second line. So I took it all the way to second line, and um, oh man, people like that arrangement. And we've got like a little soli on it and stuff like that. So yeah, yeah. And when I said that these used to be like uh, afterthoughts, it's because it was always these like little local jazz festivals that we would play in, right? Um, not not a like a club situation or anything like that where people are actually sitting down and listening. It's the festivals where people are actually roaming around. And so it's hard to take that kind of stuff as seriously as, let's say, being at a show bar where people are actually sitting there listening to your stuff, right? So, anyway. So, yes, if you look at my career, and you know what, I want to do a video on what I learned from Ashley Alexander about the music business. And basically, he told me, and it wasn't a workshop. He didn't know who I was. I just went to a workshop that he was presenting, and he was talking about the music business, and he was saying that do everything that you can do to make money, and you will survive. If all you are is a jazz player, it's gonna be rough. Because, in fact, I wrote down a quote from a book about Clifford Brown where they quoted Clifford Brown saying that there were a lot of great jazz players, and I'll end with this thought. There's a lot of great jazz players, but what happens to them is largely financial, he said. Great jazz players who have to go get a day job can't maintain that greatness. Not enough to finally get picked up by a label or whatever. Today we don't even have that, right? So you just got to do what you got to do to make money. And if that means you go play a wedding, you go play a wedding. Now I can tell you this. Maybe the gigs I played were not jazz gigs, but I promise you that the reason I got called was because I was a jazz player. And more importantly, I was a jazz player that could play the lead stuff. That's how I got all the gigs. I used to at the height of my career, and I don't mean that in terms of my playing. I'm talking about how many gigs I used to get. I don't measure my success that way anymore. But when I had the most gigs, I was playing as much as 12 gigs per week. And out of those 12, maybe one or two might have been genuine jazz gigs. So that's what you do. As far as the financial stuff goes, you just got to take gigs that pay. Unless you have some other plan. Right? I'm not saying that's the only way to do it. That's the only way I know how to make that work, um, that has any dignity to it. I could not be one of those guys that married someone who would support me, so to speak. I'm a little bit too old fashioned for that. Okay, I apologize. Not a little bit. I'm way, way, way too old fashioned for that. Okay? Um, I think it's shameful, actually. Not shameful. I can't. I'm not judging anybody else. Don't get me wrong. I'm not judging anybody else. I think it's shameful for me to depend on my wife to pay all the bills and all that stuff so that I can pursue my music. I think that's shameful. Other people can do what they believe is right. I don't believe that's right. So, so yes, I went and I played gigs that were not. The weird thing about that is I think I'm a better jazz player because I did all that. I think I'm a better jazz player because I played all that lead stuff. I'm a better jazz player because I did all that top 40. I'm a better jazz player because I played all those salsa gigs and cumbia gigs and all that. I believe all of that made me a better player. Same thing with the classical stuff. Um, but anyway, I hope that answers your question. All right, guys, I better get going. Thank you for hanging out. Um, thanks all of you. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Gabriel, Javier, um, Anthony, Mr. Walker. Go play the trumpet. Hey, everybody, go to his. He's got um, a great channel too. So go check out. Go play the trumpet. Thank you, Cardio, for coming out. I keep saying cardio. Cardo. I hope I didn't miss anybody. Thanks, all of you. And we'll see you guys next week, all right? Have a great week. God bless you.